From shootout goals to near goalie fights, there were plenty of entertaining games throughout the 2022-2023 season. Which games top the list? We discuss today on Locked on Wild.
You're Locked on Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Locked on Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome to the show. If you are an everydayer that listens each and every day of the week, we are glad to have you back. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by Game Time. You can download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off of your first purchase. On today's episode of Locked on Wild, Alex Micheletti joins the show as we discuss the best games of 2022-2023. Plenty to pick from, and so we'll dive into what made several of these games as good as they were. My name is Seth Topal, your daily Minnesota Wild insider. As mentioned, it is time for another Micheletti Monday. Alex Micheletti is here. And Alex, fresh off of seeing the Vegas Golden Knights punch their ticket to the Western Conference Final, waiting to see if it's either Dallas or Seattle that joins them. And so still some exciting playoff hockey, but plenty of games from the regular season from a Wild perspective to take a look at here today to try to put into a similar category. Obviously not postseason games, so it's going to be a little lower on the ladder, but still plenty of fun games to discuss today.
Yeah, like we've talked about all season, what a roller coaster it was for the Wild. They still provided a lot of entertainment. Not as many empty net type situations, but there still was some thrilling overtime games. Hockey Day Minnesota always, so lots of fun ones to pick from for sure.
And I'm gonna do something bold here. We're going to go with what I think is probably the game on the top of my list because there's a lot to break down from this one. It is the 8-5 win against the St. Louis Blues. I'm putting that in my top game of the season because you have just peak meltdown Jordan Binnington. You have a near goalie fight with Marc-Andre Fleury. You have Binnington chirping the Wild bench after giving up his fourth goal of the night. Oh, and the Wild scored 8 goals in that one too.
Yeah, it was absolutely crazy. You had Braden Shen going nuts too. Remember, he was slamming his stick and he getting thrown out. There was just chaos all over the ice. You could tell too. It was just the goals that Binnington was letting in. You knew that he was ready to get in meltdown mode, and he just needed one little thing from the Wild to set him off. And it was Ryan Hartman. And so yeah, and the fact that it was a national TV game too, that added to it. And all the TNT boys were all fired up. So yeah, it was crazy.
I'll never forget, and I think it's because because it just so happened that Marc-Andre Fleury was mic'd up for that game. So we had a chance to see everything that went into, Hartman getting right up in the mix of that scrum and just absolute chaos down on the other end of the ice. And Fleury sees it happen and he says, as he famously said after the game, he said, I saw they were kind of going after Hartman and that's my guy. So I gotta go defend him. But I think the funniest part about it is that Fleury was ready to go. He wasn't playing around with it. He was ready to drop the gloves and to try to give Binnington a piece of his mind.
Yeah, that would have been so epic. I think you would have probably taken Binnington too. So, anytime you see a goalie fight, it's just pure chaos because then, I think it would have started a line brawl. I think everybody would have been involved, and so I can see from the refs' perspective why they didn't want to have that happen, but they had lost complete control of that game, and so it would have been just crazy to that would have been one for the to you go and look it up on YouTube years later. So, but still very entertaining.
I forgot that the Wild actually trailed 3-1 in this game heading into the second period, and just there were just an assortment of power play goals in this game. The Blues had two from Jacob Vrana in the first period. Then you have the Wild scoring five times in the second period. Klingberg, Sundqvist, Shaw, Hartman, and Goligoski. And then Goligoski saluting the crowd after he scored his goal to make it 6-4. Oh, and then there were a couple of goals after that as Ryan Reeves and then Ryan Hartman also scored to make it 8-4 at that point. And for it's pretty well known the struggles that the Wild had scoring goals this season. And so to erupt for 8 in that manner, to just flip the switch and score 5 goals in the second period, was just crazy.
Yeah, and I mean Fleury, the start of that game was just horrendous for him, and so whatever Dean said in intermission worked, and it was perfect for Bill Guerin too, because of his the additions he made to the team were scoring goals. Whoever thought Ryan Reeves was going to score in that game, Sundqvist too. So Klingberg, I mean, and Goligoski getting a breakaway goal and then mocking the crowd with the Binnington, that was just absolutely unhinged. I did not see that coming from the veteran. So that was pretty cool for sure.
Yeah, and so that tops the list. And so let's just get the ones that kind of went crazy on both sides out of the way first, and then we'll talk about some of the more tense, tight games that came down to the wire. The other one near the top of my list was the Wild beating Dallas 6-5 in a shootout. Now, this one obviously stings because, and I remember it so vividly going into that game, because if memory serves, it's the second night of a back-to-back,
Yes.
and the Wild had played. That was the shootout win over Anaheim.
Yes.
That you look at that game and you're like, holy cow, this is gross. Like, this game should not be going to a shootout. How are we going to be able to even possibly do anything with Dallas the next day? And then the Wild get just the greasiest goals against Jake Ottinger. Like, that was the Kirill off of Ottinger's back. You had Jordan Greenway scoring a goal. It just was like, it was just the grimiest goals to get a 5-1 lead. And then all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, you look and, oh boy, 4 goals in the third period. And 2 goals within a minute, and you're sitting there and it's just it looks like you're going to lose that game in regulation. And the funny thing too was it was even 5-1 because Joel Eriksson Ek scored 30 seconds into the third period. So you have a 5-1 lead, and it's just like, okay, you've got a 4-goal lead. Can we just hold it?
No, you knew Robo, you knew Jason Robinson and that crew was gonna make a push, and that their top line was just absolutely phenomenal. Rupe Hintz, what a season he's had, and he's shown it in the postseason too. He's been one of the best players. Yeah, they, and Joe Pavelski, all he does is score goals now too, since he came back from the injury against the Wild. But yeah, that was nuts. And the Wild were they dominated in shootouts this season, so that was another one where they snuck out another victory, which was crazy.
The thing about that one too, in that shootout, is you're looking for your goalie to stop most of them and to maybe just get one. That one came down to one stop. That game came down to one stop, and that was Rupe Hintz, who was not able to bury one as he missed the net. But Matt Zuccarello scored on Scott Wedgwood. Kirill Kaprizov scored, and then Freddy Gaudreau scored to win it too. And that was the other thing. That was the other thing about that game too, is that Ottinger got pulled, and so you finished the game with Scott Wedgwood, and so does Ottinger, if he stays in the game, does he end up being able to pull that one out in the shootout? We'll never know.
We'll never know, but definitely a better chance than Wedgwood for sure.
Yeah, and it was one of those, I remember after the game being like, okay, so they won, but
technicality.
we got to talk about it. Like we got to figure that out. And I mean, it was just the classic like play. You're not playing to win. You're playing not to lose.
They were just trying to survive. Yeah, it was crazy.
You can't do that against Dallas.
No, they aren't just gonna give up. That's not a team that does that.
So those are probably the top two on my list, but there are tons of others as well. I mean, we've got the entire series against the Buffalo Sabres this year to discuss because those were two fantastic games as well. We continue to roll through the best games of 2022-2023 as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode is brought to you by a product I use every single day of the week. That is AG1 by Athletic Greens. Maybe you're like me. You want to be healthy and eat well, but it's always easier said than done. That's no longer the case with AG1. With one delicious scoop of AG1 in a glass of water each day, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food sourced superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging. It can be hard and expensive to keep track of multiple different supplements and vitamins, not to mention how hard it can be on your stomach. AG1 costs you less than $3 a day. You're investing in your health, and it's cheaper than your cold brew habit. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Continuing today's episode of Locked On Wild, your team every day. Once again, thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. For the everydayers, you will get a second episode come in later today as we start our player evals. We'll start with Kirill Kaprizov and work our way down the list through the entire roster here over the probably about the next month, leading right up to the start of the draft. So look for those starting up later today, and we'll move them through the rest of the week as well. We continue today's episode looking at the best games of 2022-2023. Seth Topol joined by Alex Micheletti. Alex, we've got a couple of series that were really entertaining games on both ends. Now, we're going to start with the Buffalo Sabres because that first game was a little bit of a mess. A game in which the Wilds, if they could have just gotten some competent special teams, I think is probably the apt way to put it. They may have been able to win that game, but a great battle back and forth, 6-5 overtime loss for the Wild. That was the Rasmus Dahlin game, but the Wild battled. Entertaining game to start that series for sure.
Yeah, that Buffalo team, Tage Thompson, what a season for that kid. He is absolutely incredible. 6'7" on skates, 6'8". Yeah, it's just an incredible breakout season for him. That's a team that's on the rise, and so very entertaining games. First Buffalo, and well deserved points earned for the Wild against that team. For sure.
And it was, I remember watching this one you had the Tage Thompson power play goal, and I even went so far as to say, I don't know what you do about it.
That was a missile. There was no way they were stopping that.
That was just his shot from his spot. And you can try to get in position to defend that shot all you want, but there's just something about a guy getting to his office. I mean, the Alex Ovechkin part of the rink, and Thompson got to his spot, and he ended up winning. And there was a pretty clear discussion after that first Buffalo game of, we can't play at that speed. The Wild cannot try to match wits with the Buffalo Sabres. And so fast forward to Hockey Day, Minnesota, the final game in a full day of great competition around the state, collegiate games as well. And then you have round 2 between the Wild and the Sabres. A much different story here in this one, as the Wild end up winning 3-2 in a shootout. Again, with this game, it was much tighter. It was much more much more of a tense game as the Wild tried to really ratchet up the physicality, and then another shootout won by Freddy Gaudreau.
Yeah, the shootout king. You know, how many games did he win? You know, in the shootouts, it was just absolutely incredible. His hands are perfect. He's the perfect guy for a shootout. If you were trying to like create a player, Freddie was meant for shootouts, and overtime was nuts too. It was just back and forth. You know, just such a fun team to go against for sure. Dylan Cousins, well, that's another name that had a career season. He's, and along with Darlene, they just have so many players. Alex Tuch, obviously, as we know, and Casey Middlestad, Kyle Okposo as the veteran. So, yeah, if they can get goaltending, if Levi, who came from Northeastern, if he ends up being the real deal, he was in college, but if he can do it at the pro level, watch out for Buffalo, because all they needed was a goalie. And Craig Anderson, the 42-year-old, is finally done. It's amazing that he lasted so long, but it's Levi's time now.
Yeah, and the Wild saw in this game Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen.
Yes, another young guy.
So they had quite the rotation of goalies.
They had Comrie too. I think they had like four goalies going.
Yeah, they let a lot of people. It was an equal opportunity goalie rotation. They just let a lot of people get reps at the goalie position, and this one as well. It came down to one shootout attempt in which Marc-Andre Fleury was able to make a save. He stopped Jack Quinn, and that ended up being the clincher as the Wild pick up a very exciting win against the Buffalo Sabres. So put that one on the list as well. Maybe one of the more notable games of the season because of what all went into it. We definitely need to talk about the win against the Carolina Hurricanes at home. The overtime winner scored by the guy celebrating his 1,000th career game at the NHL level. What a crazy game that was against the Hurricanes. And the Wild were still trying to kind of figure it out at that point. Relatively early in the season. We're still trying to kind of claw their way out of the mess that was left at the start. The Wild, with that win, improved to 8-2, a 2-1 overtime win. And I don't know how you write it better to have Goligoski getting celebrated and then scoring the game winner, and then the picture of him like just blasting into the wall
with his legs up.
with his tongue out celebrating. Yeah. Just that one was one of the, I think, crazier games too, because nobody gave the Wild really a chance in that one. The Hurricanes were one of the best teams in the NHL right off the bat. Nobody really gave the Wild a shot, and they came out and they got it done.
Yeah, they had Brett Burns, back in town, and so yeah, I mean, they're just an incredible hockey team, and the fact that Alex Goligoski was even on the ice in overtime was crazy moment, and just a beautiful goal. And the interview with our good friend Kevin Gorg was just emotional. It was
Yeah.
one of the best moments for sure. He had all of his family there. He's a former Golden Gopher from Grand Rapids, and so to do it in in front of your hometown fans and friends and family was just perfect for Goligoski. And he hadn't been playing. He was getting scratched, and for a veteran that's been in the league for so long to get, he wasn't hurt, it was healthy scratch, so that makes things even tougher. And so it was a great moment for him to get in the lineup and then be on the ice for overtime and bury the winner for sure.
And I forget because he had been scratched because they were trying to get Addison into the lineup more, and that was. Well, no, Addison play. That must have been one of the games that they went 11-7.
Yeah.
I think it was because Addison played 7 minutes, and you got all the defensemen in. So yeah, that was an 11-7 game because of a forward injury, I think was the case. So it was Ryan Hartman that didn't play. So there you go. But yeah, that was a great game as well. A fun kind of fly off for the Goligoski 1000 games story, but there are so many more. There are a lot of games that were pretty exciting here this season. We've got another season series to discuss. Should probably discuss the 2 games against the Devils, and we've got a Martin Jones sighting as well against the Minnesota Wild. So we'll discuss all that as we finish today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. There is nothing that is more stressful than trying to find tickets for a game the day of the event, but Game Time is here to try to help make that process a little easier. Game Time is a revolutionary app that makes it fast and easy to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. They offer killer deals on last-minute tickets, and their best price guarantee you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll see. One of the more elite portions of the Game Time app is the ability to see images from your seats before you purchase tickets. So head to the Game Time app today, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Final segment of today's episode of Locked on Wild, your team every day. Thank you once again for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Again, a reminder, you can listen in for player evals starting up this afternoon and running throughout the next month or so. We'll try to do one per day, and then we will mix in some other news as well as things happen between now and the draft. Seth Topol joined by Alex Micheletti. Let's talk about the 2 games against the Devils because I remember looking at those games and thinking, I don't know how this is going to go, but you have another shootout in one of the games, and then you have one of the signature highlights, I think, of the entire season. The Devils come down on one end of the ice, nearly score, and Matt Boldy just happens to have the puck come directly to him. He beats the buzzer with nothing left in the tank, beats the buzzer, scores to win it in overtime with no time left on the clock. So you could say I go for Blues Wild as the game of the year just for the sheer entertainment factor. In terms of the play on the ice, very compelling case to be made with that overtime win against the Devils.
Yeah, it's just like the Sabres, it's another just extremely fun, young talented team to watch. Jack Hughes, just an incredible hockey player, and Dougie Hamilton, he always seems to play well against any team he's with against the Wild, and and the goaltending, Vanacek was very good, throughout the regular season for them. And Lindy Ruff, they wanted him fired, and then he comes back, and they had one of their best seasons in a long time. And so just huge wins against the Devils.
Guess who won the shootout?
Freddie.
Yeah.
Yes.
Freddy Gaudreau. Another.
Yeah.
Although this was, I remember this as being that shootout win against the Devils. I remember that being one of the resume builders for Philip Gustafsson, where you're like, he did some really good things in this one. Did not allow anybody to score in the shootout. Just absolutely stonewalled the Devils in the third period and in overtime. Faced a ton of shots down the stretch. Didn't blank. And so this was both of them, in fact, because he got both starts against the Devils this year. Both of them were pretty darn good.
Yeah, he started to really lock in. I think as he got into starting goaltender shape, and because it was it was great. We were like, uh-oh, did Bill make the right decision in trading Talbot for this guy, especially against Colorado to start the season, where he gave up just a ton of goals, and the team was 0-3, but he really turned it around, and he saved the Wild season for sure. He kept them afloat, and there was multiple times throughout the season where it's like, is this team even going to make the playoffs? And so yeah, that was definitely one of his signature moments for sure.
Another game on the list is one that the Wild ended up losing, but I looked at it as kind of a benchmark game at the time. That was the game against the Toronto Maple Leafs in Toronto. It was a 2-1 overtime loss, but it came down to a bad turnover that led to Toronto's game-winning goal. But beyond that, I came away really impressed with how the Wild played on the road against a really tough Toronto team. And guess who? Philip Gustafsson again, just absolutely lights out. He stonewalled a very effective offense for the Maple Leafs. And again, it comes down to really one bad break. You maybe, if you can squeeze in one more goal, you probably don't even have to worry about it. But I'll put that one on the list, even though it ended in an L.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to shut down Austin Matthews. He's just a freak of nature. Well, at least in the regular season. sorry, Toronto. Not postseason. You're like the Wild. But yeah, in the regular season, that Toronto team was just just a juggernaut. Mitch Marner, John Tavares, William Nylander. The list goes on and on. Nylander, just amazing goal. Just Gus kept the Wild in it, and at least to get a point was huge.
I think we got two more. We should put the win against the Winnipeg Jets at home 6-1, and you looked at that game. I recall looking at it and saying, Connor Hellebuyck might be back. He had a little bit of a down year a year ago, but then was really, really good this year. And he looked like he was back. And so the point of emphasis was you got to attack him right at the net. And the Wild ran him off the ice in that one. Foligno scored twice. Boldy had a goal. Kaprizov had a power play goal. And it was a game against a Winnipeg team that coming into that game was 11-5-1. So they started the year great. And the Wild they never ended up taking their foot off the gas, and they just turned this one into a laugher.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, right? The Wild, for some reason, are in Hellebuyck's head. They've played really well against him lately, and he had a Vezina type season. He's a finalist, so to beat a goalie like that, and Hellebuyck was letting big rebounds, juicy rebounds for the Wild to to attack with, and so that was crazy. The crowd was extremely fired up, and like you said, they were feeling pretty good with bonus, at the time, and so you have Blake Wheeler back home, and they just it was a beatdown of the Jets.
The final game that we'll put on the list was a game in which Kirill Kaprizov did not play, but it didn't end up mattering because that was during the month of March, in which Matt Boldy went nuts. And this was a game in which the Kraken at that point were pretty for real. We weren't sure about the Wilds. We were like, it would be great to get that signature win against a team that's in the postseason. And now that I say that, I've got another game that we'll discuss to finish. But the game in which Boldy had his second hat trick in 3 nights against the Kraken, and the Wild end up winning that game 5-1. Fleury nearly records a shutout, and it was really just a great performance up and down the line for a team that the Kraken did a lot right in that game. The Wild just ended up being the ones that scored the goals and came away with the win, and it all started and ended with Boldy.
Yeah, it's amazing, looking, at these teams and what they were then and now and in the postseason and the success the Kraken are having. Yeah, the Wild really, they played great defensively. That Kraken team is so fast.
Yeah.
And it's a team. They've mentioned it in the postseason too. You don't really know who their top line is or their fourth line because,
right.
Yeah, I mean they have a guy on their fourth line, Sprong, who 20 plus goals on the fourth line. It's insane, and their goaltending, it was kind of all over the place. Martin Jones was in there, so that definitely helped. But the Wild took advantage, and that's what you have to do in this league. Wins aren't given out. You have to earn it, and it was awesome to see Matt Boldy step up without Kaprizov. It might have been an issue when he came back, but at the time, they needed somebody to step up, and he was the guy to do it. And they weren't cheap goals either; they were snipes.
Oh,
yeah.
And we're both technically right, but I guess I must have been thinking of a different Kraken game because Grubauer actually started.
Oh, Grubauer, yeah.
But he got yanked because he gave up 4 goals on 13
and then they put
shots.
Jones in.
And then Jones gave up a goal on 7. So the Wild scored 5 goals on 20 shots, which is pretty high percentage, at least according to my math. Another contender for game of the year, final game that we'll get to here today. The game that vaulted the Wild into first place in the Central Division, the 4-2 win against the Colorado Avalanche. Can't leave that one off because that was a game that had a ton of meaning. That was also a benchmark game for the Wild. They were more than up to the task, and they ended up just really jumping on Georgiev right off the bat and ended up beating an Avs team that was fighting for first place at the time. Avs ended up taking that, but it was a fun way to really show like the peak of what this team could be in 2022-2023. Great goaltending, opportunistic goals, and really just a really fun game against the Avs.
Yeah, it was chaos throughout that game. Gus was absolutely incredible. I think that the Avs top line was like a -9. That was, they were just frustrating McKinnon. Rantanen was, he was all over the ice, and Gus was shutting him down. And then, they had the Wild had to deal with the delay of game penalty by Spurgeon too, at the end there. Remember that? That was just that was insane. They just, it was back and forth. The Byram goal coming out of the penalty box, it was crazy. Freddie, amazing play. It just unbelievable. Yeah, it was so much fun.
Sam Steele with a goal. The spinorama to score on Georgiev, and we're all like, he did what? How did he do it? So yeah, that's definitely on the list too. This is just the tip of the iceberg. If there are any games that we did not cover, leave them in the comments so that we make sure that we don't miss out on any of the best that the Wild had to offer in 2022, 2023. You could talk about Game 3 against the Stars too. Electric atmosphere at home. Came out flying. Joel Eriksson Ek unfortunately got hurt, but the Wilds, they really took care of business there in Game 3, so put that one on the list too. But the rest of the series, Game 1 too. Game 1, Game 3, but not games 2 or 4 or 5 or 6. But that will do it for today's episode. So thank you once again for tuning in to today's show. If this is your first time listening, we welcome you to the show and hope that you'll join us for tomorrow's episode. Make sure to take the time to subscribe on YouTube and follow on your favorite podcast platforms. If you are an everydayer and listen to this show every single day of the week, thanks for tuning in again, and we will see you tomorrow with a new episode of Locked On Wild. You can find new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.